put your hands together and help me welcome them. It's great. Thank you very much. Well, welcome to the
We're so
stage.
busy talking, I didn't hear my introduction.
Well, that just promises we're going to have a good time.
Hello.
Now, we were just talking about the t-shirt story just now, and I think that that's just such a fun way to start. So if you could share that with the audience.
I had a photo shoot yesterday, and I was standing there waiting, and the gentleman came in, and he had on this white t-shirt that had a drawing of Admiral Akbar on it, but he had a little speech blurb beside it, and in the speech blurb it said, "I do have other lines on the movie, you know." And I just burst out laughing, and I said, "Where did you get that t-shirt? That's my t-shirt. I gotta get one like that." And he proceeded to take it off and give it to me. I'd like to point out he had another t-shirt on. I wasn't exposing him to the world by doing this, but it was very... I have so many things from different conventions that fans have given me. I'm always amazed by the generosity of fans. So.
That's right, we were talking about that earlier. Apparently your entire garage, or you have a small place and you're just bursting at the seams. What are some of the things that people have given you over the years?
Yes, I live in a very small terrace property over in England. And if I were to try to display everything that had been given to me over the years, I would have no place to live in my own house. But I felt bad about the fact that it was all basically like sitting in boxes in the loft. So on my website, admiralakbar.co.uk.
That's a good plug.
It's supposed to say my Star Wars collection, but I didn't get a very good web designer guy to do it, so it just says my collection. But I took a photograph of everything that I've been given by fans from the conventions, and a little blurb remembering, the person and what it was it gave me, or where we were, or whatever, came to mind with it. But I was really, it worked out pretty good, because it allows me to show people my collection.
The Tim Rose collection.
The Tim Rose
Coming to a museum near you.
Collection of Star Wars. They think, oh, you're going to have your costume, you're going to have that. No, none of that. Not allowed to keep any of that. It's the stuff they gave me. I had a kid. He came up to the table, and especially like big celebration where things are going along at a pretty fast pace. And the toy comes in. What do you want? Do you want your name on this? And no, that's for you. And I said, what? And I looked down at it, and he had taken one of the Akbar toys, but he'd taken its head off, and he'd sculpted my head and put it onto the body, and then he'd done a little sculpture of Salacious Crumb and put it on my arm. So it was me with the Akbar head on this arm and Salacious on this arm, and absolutely wonderful. Only one of those in the entire world, and he'd made it for me. I was just...
That's such a testament of love. And did you ever foresee that Admiral Akbar would have that level of enduring appeal to the fans? I mean, that's gotta make you feel great.
No, because there was a long period in between there after the movie. I came to the world of conventions quite late. And I was living in England, and this guy started contacting me. He said, oh, I have a autograph collector's event in Basildon, and we'd like you to come to it. Why? Well, so that you can sign your autograph and pictures and things. I said, why? Well, people collect them. Do they really? And of course, the first thing I thought of then was I'd seen this movie, Galaxy Quest. So I thought, oh God, I go to one of these conventions and they're all going to be like these guys in Galaxy Quest. So, between that and not really knowing what was going on with any of it, I held off. But then when I started doing them and got to meet the fans, the real fans, and not the crazy ones from Galaxy Quest, I just absolutely loved it. So.
Well, that's great. I'm glad that you're enjoying the experience, and I know that we're all enjoying having you here. And look at you, give it up. So
Even Wally is over there. You want to know where Wally is? He's third row from the back.
we found him. Do you want to take us back to the start of your career? How did you get into puppeteering? Oh. We're going to play a mental video montage right now.
I always claimed that I didn't get into puppeteering until university, but like all these things, one at my local newspaper in upstate New York had written this in when they do an interview with me and that. And of course, my second grade school teacher has to show up with the photograph of the puppet show I'd done in second grade. So, make a liar out of me, why don't you? But I hadn't really, I certainly hadn't thought of it as a career. And while I was at university trying to decide what I wanted to be when I grew up, I knew I enjoyed doing graphics, I really enjoyed sculpting and doing drawings. I enjoyed writing things, poems, song lyrics, all that sort of thing. But I always felt like I was going to have to decide which one of these things I wanted to do when I grew up and have to give something away in order to have my career as an adult. And the university started doing Renaissance fairs. And it was the first one that they'd done. And we all had our little job. I actually played God in the video. Okay, I'm going to split sideways here. I was playing God in No Before the Deluge. So we're out in the field. We're up on a wagon, a hay wagon and everything. And they built a little set on the back of it. And then there was a ladder that went 20 foot in the air, and I had to step through this proscenium, this little curtain, and say how displeased I was with mankind. So I said, I am displeased with mankind, that which I have made, now I do destroy! And as I held my hands into the air, it was a fairly clear day, but this bolt of lightning came down, and it hit the tree right beside the edge of this field. The audience is all there going, boy, Jack Lawson really can't do special effects, can he? And of course I'm there going, I'm higher than anybody else in this field, and there's lightning. I didn't want to be God anymore, I just wanted to be off that ladder. Anyway, we did that, but we wanted to make it special. We wanted to make it as big as possible, this fair. So I started researching the old Bartholomew fairs in England. And they were held on the frozen Thames, which never freezes anymore since I've lived there. And I kept reading about Punch and Judy shows. So I said, okay, I'll do a Punch and Judy show as well. Of course, it's so easy doing a puppet show. And there was a mom and pop marionette troupe that used to entertain us in our elementary schools, who I knew lived on the way up to Kingston. So I go up there and knock on the door and say, hi, could you teach me how to make a puppet? Thinking the door's going to go closed and that'll be that and I won't have to worry about it anymore. And they opened the door and invited me in, and they took me downstairs to the cellar, and they had been doing puppets since the late 20s and vaudeville era. And there were hundreds of gorgeous artistic creations, all in plastic bags, all the way around the walls of their workshop. And I just looked around there and I said, you can make things this beautiful and have this much fun and live in a house that's this nice. Can you teach me how to make a puppet? And they did. But my first puppet was my Punch and Judy. I made the heads out of elastic, and they were so heavy that halfway through the performance, my fingers were going to sleep and the heads kept dropping. So it wasn't one of my performances I'd like you to see today. I'll put it that way, but that was sort of the beginning. That was the beginning.
And how did you find your way working for Lucasfilm and into the Star Wars franchise?
Well, you ask all the easy questions, don't you?
It's my job.
When I left university, I was doing my own bag puppet booths. It was a Chinese form where the booth sits right on your shoulders and then you could just walk around. And I did the true story of Prince George and the Dragon, which a young guy in Connecticut saw, and he made it into, it was the movie that had Sean Connery playing the dragon and Dragonheart. Well, if you want to know the story that I did in my little puppet shows, it was that. But he stole it from me and made it into the movie.
That's shocking.
Anyway, but when I had to earn a proper living, I went to New York City and I was working for a theatrical lighting company doing lights on Broadway and off-Broadway. But I heard that the Muppets were hiring people for the workshop. So I went over and knocked on the door and said, "Hi, I'd really like to make puppets with you." And they very thankfully gave me a job. So I worked with the Muppets for quite a few years. And actually, it was at the time when Fraggle Rock was just being talked about. And I went to Jim and I said, "Jim, I'd really like to puppeteer on Fraggle Rock." And I puppeteered on Dark Crystal and Labyrinth and all these things. But he said, "Well, we feel that your real value to the company is the animatronics work." And at the time, being a young kid, not really seeing the world from the right perspective, I thought he was telling me that he didn't think my puppeteering was good enough. It's only with age and perspective from history I realized that it was much easier for him to find another puppeteer. But the animatronic stuff that we were doing, that was what was selling those movies and getting people talking and wanting to come see the next movie. And he wanted me to keep making that stuff I was making for him in the workshop. Unfortunately, he didn't want it enough to pay me as much as puppeteers got paid, which is why I wanted to be one of the puppeteers. So I got angry with him and I left. I'm now sitting back in my little apartment in New York City saying, all you ever wanted to do was puppets. And you've just left the biggest puppet company in the world. What kind of a complete, stupid, dumb head are you? And as I'm sitting there beating myself up, the telephone rings, and my friend Mike, who is now working for Phil Tippett out on Blue Harvest, Horror Beyond Imagination. He had been working on this Cy Snoodles character, but he had made her as a classic marionette. So she was about 5.5 feet tall and very heavy, about almost 60 pounds for a marionette. And he was up on the scaffold and just practicing to see how she worked. And she pulled him off the scaffold and he broke his arm.
Oh, wow.
So he called and said, well, if you can get out here to California, you might be able to take my place because I can't do the movie now. So I immediately got on an airplane and went out there and took his place. But the first thing I did was redesign Cy Snoodles. I made her as a reverse string marionette. So instead of classic where you're over the top, I suspended her on bungee and then went underneath the set, and I had catcher mitts on my legs and rods up into her feet, and we had the floor all cut out. We choreographed her dance and then had to put train tracks in the floor so these rods could come through the floor for the dance. And it worked really well, because unlike a marionette that was like floaty, if you let go of her, she would float in the air on her own, so you could pull her down onto the stage and she could stomp her feet, which of course a marionette couldn't do. So it was sort of a cool thing. Like I said, it was just stuff that my little dyslexic brain came up with, but it ended up working really well. So not well enough they didn't replace her with CG when they redid it all, but.
How do you manage to convey the emotionality of your characters? Through animatronics, through animating? How do you do that? Well, that was an easy question. Okay, let's just move on.
Yes.
Like, is there a process?
Everybody, including Disney, when it comes to a puppet, they think that because it's a puppet, you can just stick anybody inside of there, and it's still going to be a puppet.
Right.
And it don't work that way. And I can't tell you how it happens, but you very definitely, especially when I work with the guys in the business all the time, they can be a puppet I didn't even know they did, and I can tell you who's doing that puppet because so much of them comes out through these characters.
So did you have sorry?
Well, no, it's just, they're very simple things, but it's somehow the simplicity of it allows your emotions and everything to flow through it and be seen.
So did you have a sort of a background identity or an idea of who Admiral Akbar was before you performed him? Like, did you create a sort of an identity?
Yes, back in those days, we were given the script. And we were allowed to rehearse like crazy, you know, to get everything right. And I knew because of the position he's in, he's got to be in his late 50s, early 60s, because just to be in charge of people like that, you got to be that kind of age and everything. And of course, I was only 24 years old at the time, so I was doing my best to play a much more mature person. But of course, where I think I let the character down the most was vocally. So I'm very happy that I got overvoiced by Eric Bowersfeld to do it, because the other wonderful things about puppets is there's very few of them who are actually done by a single person ever. And it's that working together as a group. I mean, in the Skeksis, some of them were 6 people. And it's that working together when the magic happens, and you start off by the numbers. Okay, when I say this word, I need him to blink and then look there and that. But all of a sudden, the whole group comes together, and you all know who this character is and what he would do. And then you can just start ad-libbing, and the character totally stays alive, and that's when they're complete magic. You know, that's unlike CG.
That's amazing.
You can be right there in the room with them, and they're just as alive as they are when they're on the screen. You know, so that's what I love about it. You know, it's the magic that I love.
Oh, thank you for sharing that with us. That's amazing. What about your other characters, or who stands out as? I mean, they're all kind of, I don't know if this is the right way to describe them, but they're kind of like your kids in a way, and it's hard to choose from them. But who did you enjoy playing the most?
Yes, my 2 daughters realized you love my sister more. And I said, okay, now think about this, girls. You can't both be right about this, because even if I do love one anymore, that means one of you doesn't get it right. Yeah. Yes, I mean, they do those things, the movie magic or whatever, you know, where you get the ventriloquist and his dummy, and the dummy takes over the person and all that kind of thing. It's not quite like that, but it is similar. You can do a character for so long that I had a silly little thing, Bounce. It was a character I did for a Saturday morning kids program. And everybody really loved his voice, and they'd ask me to do his voice. I said, well, I can't, I don't have the puppet. I said, what do you mean? And it's just, you absorb the character so deeply that they just take over a little part of your brain, and the whole thing works together, but you need the whole thing to do it. You know? So it sounds crazy, but it's sort of how it works.
Before we turn the time over
We
to
only use 10% of our brain, so you got lots of room to put characters in there if you want to.
and sometimes they'll talk to each other.
And sometimes they don't.
Before we turn the time over to the audience, is there a particular fan moment that stands out in your mind, in which was fun to remember, or was maybe awkward?
We talked about this yesterday.
Yes. Remember we were talking about one of those moments where a fan came up to you and it was just something that just stuck with you as either inspirational or cringeworthy.
I can't remember what I told you. I'm afraid I can never...
It's a hard question because you have to think about, you know, those moments, but...
I do suffer from dyslexia. And I try to think of what I'm going to say in a talk, and I can never really plan anything out or do it like people would do it who were good at these things. I just seem to open my mouth, and when I get to the end, people say, oh, I really like it. I really like what I heard. You know, what'd you hear? Tell me now. I can't remember which that story was. There was one yesterday.
Well, let's go with
I've
that
got
one.
my badge on here.
I was going to ask you about that.
I am an architect of dreams. This woman came over, she's a badge maker here at the convention. And we got talking, and I said one of the things that I appreciate about doing the conventions was that when I hit my midlife crisis, I thought, why didn't I listen to my mother? She wanted me to be an architect. And financially, I think I would have been a lot more secure in my old age if I'd stuck and done what she'd asked me to do. And we got talking about it. She said, well, you're an architect of dreams, aren't you? Because you sort of create these things. And it's true, because what we do with the animatronics is you get this idea in your head, and then you try to pull it out of the dream world and make it three-dimensional and make it actually live in the real world, you know. So I really like that. Yes, I'm the architect of my dreams.
I think that's an amazing story right there. Thank you very much.
And being a dyslexic, when you would run into a really bad problem technically, you work on it for a certain amount of time, and then you go, you know what, I'm going to just go home and go to sleep. And I would just go home and go to sleep, and the next morning I'd wake up, and there it was all solved. And I don't know who did it, there's somebody in there told me how to solve this problem that I couldn't solve the whole day before, and it was done when I woke up. So there you go, okay, next one.
Okay, do we have any questions from the audience? Right there.
What's your fondest memory of Carrie Fisher?
Growing up as a kid, one of my favorite programs was the Addams Family.
Oh, yeah.
And when we were shooting the scenes with Jabba the Hutt, and I'm inside the tail and Carrie's chained up there in her metal bikini and everything, as we had time to kill in between shots, Salacious would look over at her and he'd go, "Ah, Academy." I was so, and he would start kissing her ankle, you know, and working his way up the calf and everything. And then they'd call turnover, and of course I couldn't get out the chalk because my arms didn't actually work. But I said, "I shall return," you know, and it always made her laugh. But of course, if I'd done that myself, I would have been fired off the production instrument. You can get away with murder with the puppets. So. Carrie was, she went too soon. I mean, what I loved was, in the more recent conventions and everything, she was really getting it. She was really appreciating the time she spent with the fans and everything, and goofing around. She was like drawing little wedding rings on people's fingers and everything. And she was really enjoying herself, and I loved watching her enjoying herself.
See, this is the background stuff that people really want to hear about. That's a beautiful story. Thank you. Thank you for asking that question, too.
Thank you.
Do you have any others? Oh, right there. Oh, yep, sure, we can. I love this, by the way. I think, no, it's me, it's my turn.
I heard an interview with Nilo Rodis-Jamero, who was talking about Howard the Duck, and he said to convince you to do it, that he promised you a burnt orange Harley Davidson. Is that true?
Oh, for Howard the Duck?
Yeah.
I'm sorry you're filming this, so I can't tell you this.
Oh. Because Nilo really wanted a...
Secrets. Talk amongst
Something
yourselves.
happened at the very end of Jedi that cost me a lot of money. So when they asked me to come back and do Howard the Duck, I went to the solicitor that charged me all this money, and I said, "Do you do contracts as well?" And he said, "Yes, I do." I said, "Would you like to negotiate a contract with ILM?" And he said, "Oh, you better." So we were discussing this contract, and he was basically trying to get the payment that I'd had to pay him to clear my name out of them as an upfront payment for me to come over and do Howard the Duck. And they said, "No, we can't do that." And he said, "Well, they're being totally unreasonable, don't do it." I said, "Yeah, but Howard the Duck, in terms of animatronics, he was like a leading man character. Normally an animatronic is something cute sitting over on the wall or adding visual interest or whatever. So I did really want to do this thing." And I said to the lawyer, I said, "I've always wanted a Harley." And he went, "Okay, right, well, I'll say that to him, you know." Even he didn't know quite where he was coming from with this one. I was being dyslexic again, you know. And so he goes, "Tim says he'll come and do it if you buy him a Harley." And I said, "Oh, sure, we can do that. We can put it on the props budget." So while everybody else on the show was climbing into the crew bus to drive off to the next location, Tim was on his Harley saying, "I'll see you guys over there." And I got my Harley into the movie. And I completely forgot about it because I hadn't watched the movie in a long time myself. But I thought, well, because I keep talking at conventions about this movie, I better watch it, you know. So I bought the DVD. And when Howard comes down to Earth, he lands in the garbage can, and Leah's being attacked by her manager, and he comes out and sort of intervenes between the two of them, and then he starts wandering off up the alley on his own, all sad and dejected. Well, I saw him laying the camera track for the shot of him walking up the alley. I said, right, I'm going to get the Harley in the shot. So I ran off and got it, and I pushed it into the back. So the Harley that George bought me is in the back of that shot, and just in the dark. But yes, it's true. Yes.
That's awesome. That's great.
Oh, also, there was a motorcycle gang in there.
Right.
And I read the script, and being a motorcyclist myself, it's like, oh, come on, you know, ever since Sturgis, motorcycle gang comes in, tears it up, all this, you know, same old, all the time. So Willard, the director, says, well, you got any better ideas? And I thought, oh, yeah, okay. Well, there's a lesbian Harley gang here in San Francisco. And he said, well, they do the movie, so I contacted them and said, would you like to be in Now at the Duck? And they said, sure, we would. So I was really looking forward to the filming and everything, because I wanted to talk to them about their bikes. But it's stupid me, of course, they were ladies and they didn't talk to men. So I got them a job on the movie, and they still wouldn't let me check out the rides, you know. I mean, it just wasn't fair. It wasn't fair.
I think there was a question right here, yes.
I was wondering, who did more voices on set, and did you know that Mark Hamill was so good at them? Who did more voices while you were on the set? You know, you were doing so many different ones, and Mark Hamill's...
Oh, yeah. No,
was he doing them then, too?
I'm no good with voices myself.
No.
No. When I first moved over to England, I tried to fit in. You know, and I heard the way they were talking with their British accent, so I tried to talk with a British accent the same as them. And they all just looked at me and said, "Oi, Dick Van Dyke, leave it out." I said, okay. Because I've lived there for 40 years now. And I said, you've lived here for 40 years and you still got your American accent? I said, well, sorry, I'm no good with accents, I guess, you know. Just have to be myself. So.
Oh, right there.
What would you say is the greatest thing you took away from working at the Jim Henson Theater?
Oh, goodness. I call the days of working with Jim Henson the days of King Arthur's court. He had a real genius for picking up, I guess you call them nerds now, picking up a collection of nerds, giving us all a playpen to play in, and we rewarded him by coming out with all this wonderful stuff that then made the movies, you know. But he was the only boss I ever worked for who, instead of telling you what you're going to do, he would ask us all what we wanted to do or what we thought should be done. And then he would just sit there and listen to everybody and then just cherry pick all the best ideas and go, that's good, that'll cost too much money, that'll take too long, but we can run with that one. And it was just so exciting to do, because if you could come up with a good idea, he'd give you the time and the playpen to play in and, you know, be able to bring it out of the dreams into the three-dimensional world. So it was a fabulous time. He died far too young. He was just getting going with the ideas that he had, so it's a shame.
There's a question here.
All right. Hi there. So my question is, for your famous Admiral Akbar line, did you ever think it'd be as big as it is today?
No. But I'm quite happy for that, because it makes people happy when I do it, and it's very quick to write on a picture. And if they fell in love with, we cannot withstand firepower of that magnet. General Calrissian, the force. No. I'm quite happy that we'll stick with It's a Trap. I'm happy with it.
And there's a question back there.
Okay, just out of curiosity, do you like the character General Grievous? Like, so I know you're into like the animatronics and stuff. And...
because of those earpieces in my ears, I do suffer from tinnitus.
Do you like the character General Grievous, or if you could describe him? He's the one that like got trained in like Jedi arts and stuff, and he like coughs a lot. He's in the cartoon as well.
Did you like General Grievous?
Yes, yeah, I'm just
Oh.
curious, yeah, what's your opinion, like, to describe?
You mean 4 CG characters?
Sorry?
You mean 4 CG characters?
Yeah, like,
What I loved most about him was we got to do Celebration in Japan. And they are incredible. They came up with actual costumes for this CG character who was nothing like a human whatsoever. You know, I'd see their interpretations of him. He was a great character. I loved it. The one thing that bothers me, to my dying day, I will have worked in the third movie. Even though I'm now episode 6, I guess, or something. Because I feel it sort of proves devolution in a way. You know, if these came before, and there's so much cool stuff in there, then why did these ones that came later not have all that cool stuff and more cool stuff on top of it? So that's just from a total insider point of view that bugs me about that part of it. But other than that, singing.
And I think, yeah, there was a question here.
What was it like being a part of the Star Wars cast?
What was it like being a part of the Star Wars
Cast?
Cast.
Well, I love when I'm doing these Q&As with Paul Blake, who was in the original Star Wars. I love telling the story.
Oh, this one's going to be good, I can tell.
Well, I was just the right age that when the original Star Wars came out, that Paul Blake was already grown up and in. I was only a teenager. So me and my buddies, we go and see it 5, 6 times. We got our feet up on the seats. We're flying X-Wings and all that, you know, totally living the dream. And then 2 movies later, I'm saying good morning to Carrie Fisher and Harrison Ford and walking past Mark Hamill and climbing into my own spaceship. So you can imagine what it was like. 2 stories I told only this morning. The first day, I've been working with Phil Tippett out in California, so we're building all the stuff out in the workshops there. Then, of course, we went across to EMI Studios, and we filmed it in England. And, oh, that's a funny story, too. Okay.
Put a pin in that one, we'll come back to it.
While I was working for Jim Henson, right up until I quit at Fraggle Rock, I had a Scottish girlfriend. And the whole international thing of how do you stay here if you don't have a work permit and that do we really love each other and that. I ended up breaking up with her and going back to New York. And then I ended up going out to California and working on that. And then I said, so where are you filming this? And they said, EMI Studios. And I went, oh man, that's got to be God telling me. So she's the mother of my 2 children. But, but when we went back to EMI Studios, I'm just there getting reacquainted and finding out where the sets are and everything. And I step out through the stage door, and we can't remember how old he was, but Warwick Davis, who must have only been, he was 12? Okay. So I come out the stage door, and I go, excuse me! And Warwick Davis, that big, on his skateboard, comes flying past. And I nearly get taken out by Warwick Davis. And then I step around the corner, and Kenny Baker had just shown up, and he had this big old Mercedes estate car that he drove in. And so this big old car comes in, it comes to a halt, and I see this guy sitting at the wheel, and I say, I think I know who that is. And then the door opens, and he just disappears. Because he goes down and then comes around the side of the door. And at that point I say, right, so you ain't in Kansas anymore. So it's just like, you know, you're in the middle of it, but it's all magic, and it's certainly not what you see every day of the week, you know. We had, there was a special job on the Return of the Jedi. When they made the Ewoks, they cast the performer, and then they sculpted the Ewok body around the performer's cast, and then they cast that, and then they put the 2 together, and they filled the space in between the 2-part cold front. So these Ewoks were better insulated than your freezer at home. And one of the downsides of that was they would quite often overheat on set and pass out. And because they were so cute and so round, when they passed out up in the treehouse, because it really was a treehouse about 12 foot off the ground, they would start rolling. So there was a special job that you only got on this movie called the Ewok Catcher. And he had to stand next to the camera, and if you saw one of them go down, you got to get there before he went through the railing. Because I don't know why, because if the Ewoks had built, you check it out in the movie, if the Ewoks had built this treehouse, and they're all this big, then why did they make the railings a full human height? If they built it at their height, they never would have rolled off. So.
I'm a horrible person for laughing.
No, they laugh with you. I worked with all these guys. My favorite movie is Time Bandits. Because I worked with all these guys, but we were exploiting them because of their size, putting them into alien costumes and goblin costumes and all this sort of thing. And in Time Bandits, they got to be there on camera, being themselves and showing just how good actors they really were. So I love that movie. But the stories leading to, I worked on Labyrinth for Jim Henson.
Fantastic.
One of the goblins in Labyrinth is Kenny Baker. Now, we were shooting this scene with the big goblin war that was going on, and they had this little guy that sat there, he was a cannonball, and he's shaking, and he gets blasted over the battle. And they wanted to make it look good, so they special effects guys tucked magnesium strips into there. And as it flew over, it was going to be like Buck Rogers' spaceship, and the sparks and the smoke would come out of it, as it flew over. But it made us all very nervous because magnesium burns at something like 8,000 C or something. It's not something to be messed with. And cannonball flies over the top, and Kenny's there in his costume, and one of these strips comes down and hits his costume. And as quick as that, he turns into a 12-foot tall Christmas tree of flame. Now, the special effects guy who had rigged this was standing once again right beside camera because, if anything was going to go bad, he was going to make sure he was there to do something about it. So he runs straight in, knocks Kenny onto the ground because it was all dirt and everything because it was meant to be this village, And he rolls him around the dirt, puts out the fire, so that's good. But Kenny was so far buried inside the costume, he didn't realize that he had been on fire. All he knew was that some big guy was wanting a piece of him. And I can tell you, these little guys can get very strappy if you think you're going to take advantage of it. And Kenny jumps up and starts beating 9 bells out of the guy who just saved his life. Now we got it all on film, but you're never going to see that.
Oh, we have a question right here.
Ah. And I worked with his son as well. When he first came on set, he had the bulldog with him. We called her the bulldog. He had a minder. And she came around to us, and she starts it, when Mr. Boy is in his chair, it means he's wanting to relax, and he's not to be disturbed, and this. And we got this whole list of when Mr. Boy is doing this and Mr. Boy is doing that, he's not to be disturbed, from this bulldog minder that he had. But she was talking to the guys who'd done the Muppets. And we'd had every famous person from all over the place, and it's like, so we would just extract the Mickey from every one of them. So, of course, to tell us that Mr. Bowie was not to be disturbed meant as soon as he sat down in his chair, "Hey, Dave, you want a cup of tea? I was just going to the bar." Hey, Dave, all this sort of thing. Anyway, within 2 days, he was having such a great time with us that she disappeared. He realized he didn't need the bulldog to protect him from anybody, and we had a great time on set. He was quite a marvelous person to work with. I felt a bit sorry for that wig we put him in, though. I didn't think, of all the wonderful, he's always been known for his styles and his clothes horsery and everything, but I didn't feel that wig did him the most favors. But he got his son. He's now become a film director himself, but at the time we just knew him as Zowie. He got him a job in the preacher shop with us, But of course, it's David Boy's son, so we're working with him, but there was always that thing, it's like, when it came time for Friday night or going to the pub, we just assumed that he got on the helicopter and went to his dad's place in Scotland or whatever, you know. But then one week says, oh, come on, we'll ask him out for a drink, you know. So we asked him out for a drink. And he was totally wonderful and so excited to be coming out with all of us. And so we got there and we're having a couple of drinks at the pub and said, if we hadn't asked you out tonight, you know, what would you be doing? Expecting the answer I just said. And he said, well, normally on the weekend, you know, I've got this little flat down here in London, and on the weekend I go down to the library and get out a book and just read the book over the weekend until I come back to work again. And we realized this kid is as lonely as hell. His dad's always someplace else. He doesn't really have any friends, you know, and it's like we felt so bad that we hadn't been friendlier to him right from the start. It's not that we didn't want to, it's just when you've got famous dads like that, you don't quite know where to start from, you know. So, and he was lovely, and he's turned out to be a genius director, and going back to the original name, Jones. So.
Well, Tim, I want to say thank you so very much for sharing your experience, your stories with us. I think we've enjoyed it. You haven't done the song? Well, I don't think we can let you go without hearing the iconic line. So, before we send you off. Wow, there certainly seems to be a lot of spaceships in the sky there. It seems kind of ominous. You might say, it's a trap. There we go. Thanks a lot, Tim.